Welcome. I'm Danielle Sally.
And I'm Eva Fusa.
And you're listening to Ghost Boss, stories about the freelance afterlife. Hey, Eva. This is how this episode's going.
Yeah, we're here. We're doing it.
You know, so Eva and I were chatting because we feel like the real good podcast host, they have an opener. They have a line.
I listened to a 90 Day Fiance podcast.
Oh, I can't wait to hear what they say there.
I can't say it. I can't say how they open most of their podcasts.
Oh, jeez.
Because you have rules for me on this podcast about what I can and cannot say.
Set rules.
Yes.
Which is funny because one of them, we try not to swear so we don't have to edit anything out. But right. I think I have sworn more than you have.
Oh, really? Well, yeah, I've been very good about my rules.
You've been much better than me.
Yeah. But yeah, I can't repeat the 90 Day Fiance ones because it's always like the wildest things people have said on the show. So like I'm like rolling through the pickup line and it's like, anyways, it's interesting. It's interesting.
So I was thinking, we need something for our listeners, something to call them. And then I said, well, what if we just open with, hey, ghost boss or hey, ghost bosses.
And I said, can we call them ghosties? like Swifties? I don't know. I got a new laptop case and it looks a little Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift's on your mind.
Maybe. I only know one song.
Ghosties. Okay, so poll. You're all going to tell us, do you want us to open with, hey, ghost bosses, or should we call you all ghosties? I'm not mad at it.
I like ghosties better.
I kind of like ghosties.
It kind of flows.
Yes. Yeah. All right. We'll see what happens.
Let us know.
Listeners get to pick.
Anyways, Danielle changed our opener. Usually we just say hi to each other. And I'm
I was like, we need to switch it up and be pros.
Great.
So, which gets us on, well, it doesn't get us on the topic, but I'm just going to switch over.
We're going to move it right along.
We're talking about speaking engagements on this episode because both Eva and I have had some recent speaking engagements.
A lot between the two of us.
Yes. Yeah. And we have some upcoming ones that we want to talk about, make sure our listeners know about. But we just want to talk about why we take the time to do speaking engagements and why it's important, especially as freelancers, to be doing speaking engagements.
I know why I do speaking engagements.
Share.
I'm weirdly extroverted.
Well, that's fair.
And I like to talk about myself.
It's funny because I say this during our topic, which is I'm so introverted. And when I get, there's a part in there that talks about like how to avoid burnout.
Yeah.
And I mentioned how I'm an introvert. And it's funny because speaking engagements can easily drain my battery, but I enjoy them. So I'm like, so if you see me at the airport later, I'm going to be useless and I'm going to be recharging.
Oh, man.
Do not bother me then, but I will give you all my social energy now.
See, I'm the opposite. I had an engagement last Tuesday night.
Yeah.
And I was like,
you were probably on a high for 2 days.
I was flying high for like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
I was doing great.
I was useless all weekend.
Oh no. I was like, oh my gosh, let's talk more.
I try so hard to do a direct flight, but this one, there was no way. So I went to Baton Rouge from Columbia. So I had to do a layover. A layover was in Atlanta. That's not
I was going to say, where would you lay over in Atlanta?
In Atlanta. Yeah. It was not bad. But like leaving Baton Rouge, we were delayed because the flight crew got stuck in traffic leaving their hotel, as it happens.
Okay.
And so thankfully, my flight to Atlanta landed in the same terminal that my flight leaving Atlanta.
Oh.
I got real lucky, but it was like, go, 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 go.
You needed to buy a lottery ticket then based on that.
So, yeah, because that never happens in Atlanta. I usually try to avoid Atlanta.
Right.
So how about you tell us about your recent speaking engagement first and how'd everything go?
Yeah. So I think I've been talking to students at USC a lot lately. So that's been really great. I was a guest on the Design Her panel last week for Columbia Design League as part of their Women's History Month panel discussion. And it was a really great panel.
Yeah.
So I was on there with Katie Fiak, who was the visual merchandising manager at Anthropologie.
Ooh.
And she owned a booth called Golden Goods.
Yeah.
Which you find at Refind. And she was helping like the new Refind on Rosewood Drive open up this week.
Cool.
So that was really cool. So like she had this perspective of like vintage and mid-century stuff and furniture and just a totally different field than what I do. And then Christine McFadden, who's a partner and creative director at Devote.
Yeah.
So similar to what I do, but in a different way, right? Like running something that high up where I was like, I'm just a little one lady show. Rita Patel, who's the owner of Hotel Trundle.
Yep.
I love Hotel Trundle. It's so beautiful. So she was great. Janet Swigler, who is a contemporary quilt artist.
Okay. Awesome.
Was fascinating.
I would love
She had these big, beautiful quilts up on the wall that like, you don't sleep with that. You hang that. Because it's like art. And then it was interesting because they got into a discussion about, is quilting a craft or an art?
Ooh.
Right. And so then I was talking to our friend Whitney afterwards who quilts. And I was like, well, clearly it's an art, not a craft.
Depends on the quilt.
That's what she said. Because like I at first saw it through this lens of like, was it only considered a craft because it was women's work and it wasn't considered an art form because of that lens?
Oh.
That's where my brain went. And she said, partially, but also it depends on the type of quilt. Like, are you creating it from like designing it or did you buy a pattern?
Yeah.
Or, so
like I would imagine you're using a pattern, then it is likely a craft.
Right. So that was really interesting. And then Maya Smith was the moderator. She's an incredible painter. She is also is the manager at Stormwater Studios. But what's cool is behind us, they had like rotating slides of all of our work. Yeah. So it was really interesting to see like it all come together. So we answered questions like, in a panel line. Yeah. Right. And it was interesting because we all had so many similarities and differences at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so
much like us.
Yes. But it was good. And then a bunch of students came up and spoke to me afterwards. Cool. And it was funny. I went to journalism school and I minored in graphic design. But there were a lot of students from the art school there, which is great. I speak to them. That's awesome. But then two people came up to me afterwards and they're like, we're also physcom kids. We almost yelled Jew school across the auditorium. I was like, yeah, I mean, you could have. You could have, and it would have been great. So yeah, it was really good. And I remember seeing this panel in the past and being like, wow, that's like really impressive. Yeah. And so like this one felt really special to be asked to be on it.
It looks so amazing.
It was good. Awesome. It was good. And they had like all female owned businesses there. So like Azalea Coffee did the coffee that night and it's a female run coffee shop. Yeah, it was great.
Awesome. Yeah. Very cool.
It was good.
And then while you were doing that, I think it was a couple days earlier. That was when I was in Baton Rouge.
You were in Baton Rouge on my birthday.
I was in Baton Rouge.
I was not working on my birthday.
Yes. I had the whole room say, I was like, it's Eva's birthday, by the way. The whole room said it.
Yay.
For AF Baton Rouge.
Yes.
What a fun group.
Yeah.
Such a fun group. And they have just a fantastic board. They took me out to dinner the night before. And then we went to their luncheon. Their lunch is just like, they got it down. It's great. And it was just such a good group. And they had so many questions for me afterwards, which I appreciate. So it was the official kickoff of becoming a Ghost Boss.
Yeah.
Which you can book Eva or I separately or together.
That's right.
We'll put that at the end too. And it was the first time that I did this topic. And so I didn't know how it was how it'd be received. Mm-hmm. The crowd they were smiling, they were happy, they were participating.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was funny because at the end, you don't know what kind of questions you're going to get. It always depends on the room. A lot of the questions were like, what's your favorite project management system?
Oh, like,
what's your favorite content management?
I like getting in the weeds, man. Like I spoke to some students recently and they asked me what the setup was like when I bought my computer.
Yes.
They're like, how much RAM did you get on your computer?
The funny thing is I did have a student came up to me because we had some students there from LSU Advertising Federation. Awesome. And they had a whole table there. And one of them came up after me and she just asked me like, I was following along. And then at the end, you started naming some products and I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah. So we walked through those together and talked to them. But it was awesome having some students at the luncheon. So it was a good group. I loved it. So
that sounds great.
Yeah.
I remember when we went to the joint conference.
Yes.
And I did like it because we got to meet people outside of our normal district.
Yes. And we joined, it was District 3, which is AAF clubs from North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia.
Yeah.
And we partnered with Seven, which is basically the rest of the South
except for Florida.
Yeah, so it was fun because I definitely remember a couple of them from that conference. So it was nice that I knew them. Sometimes I go speak at clubs and I don't know anyone, and so which as an introvert can be like, especially the dinner before. But this time I actually knew most of the people that I was having dinner with, which was nice. This is nice.
I don't know that I would remember all the clubs, but I remember at least 2 people from each of those 3 clubs.
Oh yeah, so completely.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yes.
Yay.
So I have found I love doing these speaking engagements because, I started doing them back when I worked at an agency and I didn't do a topic that was for my agency. I did a topic that was really my personal brand because it was a topic important to me as an individual.
Right.
But it was still a good tool to market my agency and be like, if you want to work with me, you work with the agency. And now I've kind of taken that same outlook of it's the same thing, except for now if you want to work with me, you work with me. Right. So I have always found speaking engagements are great opportunities for that. Yeah. And they it's a way to showcase your work because you made the presentation. It's a way to showcase it's being a good presenter goes a long way. Yeah. Especially in this field. Yeah. So you need to be a good presenter in this field. So it's just constantly giving you practice to do that too. But ultimately it's just good marketing for yourself to get out there and branch out and talk to more people. So we're constantly looking for some new speaking opportunities because we like doing them.
Yeah. I did ask them last week. I said to them last week, I was like, I love talking about me. So thanks for the microphone.
That's the funny thing. I hate it.
Oh, do you? Oh, I mean,
but I've picked both this topic and the topic I did before, they can be seen as pretty vulnerable topics because I'm talking about mental health and I'm talking about my business and I'm talking about all these things. And people have said to me, like, I appreciate that you'll come up there and be vulnerable and share all your feelings. And I think the reason I did the original topic is because I feel like we needed to shine a light on all these issues that we weren't talking about before. And making sure mental health was coming to the foreground of everything that we were talking about. And we have a lot of that mixed in to becoming a ghost boss too. We have talking about, avoiding burnout, prioritizing our time, things like that.
Doing our taxes. Talked about that last week.
Exactly. I think that it's good that we have topics that we're being a little bit vulnerable so that it kind of breaks down the walls. Yeah. So I don't know. I love it.
So something I would love, I have a feeling I know what your answer to this is going to be. Oh, but I've now in the past couple months done a handful of things where I make a deck and people are going to listen to me and they'll ask questions at the end. And now I've done 2 with the most recent one being Design Her, where I just go up there.
Or just panel, right?
Or panel. And I did one where there was no presentation. Like I basically they just asked me questions. Yeah. I know which one I prefer.
Okay. I'm curious which one you think I prefer.
I think you would prefer putting the deck together. Yeah. Like by a long shot.
Because I prefer a prepared presentation. My least favorite part of the presentation is actually the question and answer.
As a participant or as the presenter?
As the presenter. Oh, got it. I don't like the questioning. Like if I'm on a panel, I'm okay being the moderator. But okay. But it's the whole coming up with because
on the fly.
Yeah, because I'll just lose my complete train of thought, and I'm like, how am I going to answer this? And somebody will ask the question, and I'll start spewing out an answer, and then I catch myself. I'm like, did I answer your question? I have no earthly idea. No idea. Yeah. I feel like it went well, the question and answer part, but I definitely prefer the doing a well put together presentation. Okay. I mean, I'll do a panel for days. Yeah. But I prefer of course, I'm the rigid one. I prefer the rehearsed. And I say rehearsed. When I present, I really try hard to make it look like a natural conversation between me and the audience. But I also think you achieve that by it being well rehearsed.
You can also rehearse for a panel.
Oh, yeah. But I get nervous if I'm on a panel and they don't send me questions well in advance.
Oh, they sent me the questions.
I've had that happen a couple times and I'm like, you don't know what you're getting yourself into.
They sent me the questions 2 or 3 days ahead of time. Yeah. I glanced at them once. I never looked at them again. I could not tell you when I got up there what the questions were. Yeah. I assume she asked what was sent to me. Yeah. So do you want to guess which one I prefer?
I'm thinking you prefer a panel.
I do, by a long shot.
So this is why we'll be good presenting together.
Yeah. Because I like the Q&A. I like talking on the fly.
Is what I consider my weak point. I don't think I'm weak at it. It's just out of the two. And so that way I feel like when we're speaking together, question and answer, boom.
I'll do it all day.
Yes, all day.
And I think it's because it's just what I prefer because it feels more natural to me.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's when I can connect with people.
Sure.
And then I get a lot more of like visual feedback that way because people will talk to me and like, whereas where I struggle, and struggle is a loose word, like I do just fine presenting, like I'm perfectly fine. But when everybody's there, like I call it school mode, like when they're just like, they're just looking at you.
Yes.
I find that like I struggle pacing myself. Like I talk too fast.
Well, especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
I feel like there's the warm up period.
Yeah.
And it's not just the warm up period for the speaker.
Yeah.
It is a warm up period for the audience because the audience needs to gauge how you are as a speaker.
Right.
And then you're feeding off of the audience, right? So I try to look around like who's giving me eye contact right now?
Mm-hmm.
Who's smiling back at me?
Right.
Who's nodding their head?
Right.
And at first I kind of zero in on them.
You just stare.
I'm
You're my friend now.
You're my buddy. But I zero in on them and I'm trying to find a couple around the room because they're giving me my visual cues. Right. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, if they're following along, I'm doing well. And then that helps with the pacing. It was such a struggle when we were only doing virtual speaking engagements because you couldn't I
hope y'all heard my big
because you lost that audience interaction. You could kind of see windows.
It was just
faces.
A different type of engagement, but
right.
Yeah.
And so, everyone's on mute, so you can't really hear anyone. Laughter is a huge cue for me. Mm-hmm. I try and make sure I'm building in jokes in my presentation because I want them lighthearted. And if I'm hearing no laughter when I knew other times I've gotten laughter, then I am like, cool. So to virtual, when everyone's on mute, it's like, are they laughing? And so then I would have to look at the boxes and see if they're like
they're bobbleheads,
little bobbleheads. But I don't know. It was a lot harder than really doing it in person. In person, you get some good visual cues.
Yeah, I will say one of the advantages though of virtual is that not even that because I'm fine.
Yeah.
I have some little physical tics.
Oh yeah.
So
sure.
I can kick my feet under the desk on a virtual call and nobody can necessarily see it. So one of the things that I have to work on when I present in person, and it's subconscious and I'm getting better about it, but I tap my fingers or I tap my foot I managed to my knowledge, I was pretty aware of it last week. I did not sit up on that stage and tap my foot for an hour and 45 minutes.
There you go.
It was also a long panel, hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes.
That is long.
It was a very long panel. I did not sit up there and tap, 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 tap.
Yeah.
So I felt good about that. But yeah, I totally know what you mean about looking for those visual cues. And what's interesting is I've had a mix of students and professionals recently and how they interact is so different. And then even professionals who are educators though, they act kind of like students in that they are ready to sit and listen.
Yeah.
I've noticed their posture is different than somebody who just works in an agency all day.
Yep.
They're both paying attention and I can tell, but you can tell they're in different environments all day. But even within students, college students I keep going back to these middle schoolers. And there was one of those sessions, it was just 20 minutes of those kids being statues. And I was like, you can move. But one of the things I had to do when I was in-house, I had to take management training at one point and I did it for a year. And we did some public speaking stuff. And one of the things they said was always put kids or dogs in your presentation somewhere kind of on the early end.
That's fair.
Because it it'll soften up the crowd. And so now I have this slide that has a bunch of my work on it.
Yeah.
And every presentation that I've done, it makes sense to put in there. And there's a picture of a logo that I made on a hat on a dog.
Yeah.
And everybody's always like, is that your dog? And so for the first 2 or 3 times, it's like, that is not my dog. So now it goes from that. And then I'm like, that's not my dog. Here are my dogs that have these 2 very cute pictures of my dogs. And then the next slide is them being absolute terrors and yelling at me. And I've done it twice now and everybody laughs. I'm like, okay, we're in good shape.
I love it. For the same reason. That's why I always open with disclaimers. But the disclaimer is a joke, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's just that little thing to do in the beginning to bring down the wall of the audience and have them be a little bit more receptive to and just open to whatever you're going to talk about.
Yeah. I have a line that I use at the beginning of almost every presentation I make. Not at the very beginning, but early on, except for the middle schoolers because they wouldn't get it. But I tell people like who I am. And I'm like, yeah, so I started my business on February 13th, 2020.
Yeah.
If that sounds familiar, it's because that's 1 month before the pandemic. And everybody goes, ooh. And I'm like, yeah, hot take. Don't quit your job and start a business right before a pandemic. And then everybody laughs. And I'm like, okay, like, so I've said that line probably 1,000 times.
Oh, yeah.
But it's true.
It is true. And it's relatable.
It's great. I'm doing great now. And then I do this like I'm doing great now. But it was rough in 2020.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. So Eva, I've kind of shared why I feel like speaking engagements are good as a freelancer, as a business owner. Yeah. Why have you felt like they are beneficial?
So it's part of an overall strategy. I don't remember where I read this or who told me this, but somewhere along the way, I've learned that when you work for yourself, 70% of your time should be spent doing the work and 30% of the time should be spent doing things to support your work.
Yep.
And for me, of that 30%, 5% is like administrative stuff. And then 25% should be things like board service, recording the podcast, taking people to lunch, whatever that supports my brand and gets my name and my face out there in front of people. And speaking engagements are the exact same thing.
Yep.
You know, it's getting out in front of people. It's making new connections. It's being vulnerable on stage in front of people, which I think actually resonates with them. And people, I think, will then be connected to you. Maybe it leads to work, maybe it doesn't.
Right.
But now they've connected with somebody who like does what they do and like says the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
Right. I also, you know, I love to say yes to things.
Yeah.
I love being on a board.
Yeah.
I love walking into an event and being like, y'all need help next year. Yeah. Like I just cannot help myself.
Right.
And speaking engagements that for me, I found are a way to give back, right? In whatever capacity I think that is defined in at the moment, but without like this like forever commitment that like I get myself into with committee work or board service or whatever.
It is one day,
it's one shot.
Hour. I mean, in some case, even if you're traveling, it's maybe 2 days, but still it's a short window.
Right. Even if I have to prep, like even if it's not, you know, I prefer a panel where I can just get up there and kind of talk because that feels more authentic to like who I am.
Yeah.
But even if I have to put a presentation together, I mean, I think I put together one of my recent things. I had like 80 slides.
Yeah.
And it took me an hour.
Yeah.
Because when you're in our field of work, I was specifically talking about my career and the work that I've done. 2/3 of those slides were just samples of my work. And I already have those sitting somewhere on my computer. I just got to plop them in.
Sure.
So it's a way for me to like still contribute to a community, to a variety of communities without having to be like, I'm going to be president of your board.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm going to put on your gala and I'm going to organize your conference and stuff like that. And then also I get a tremendous amount of work because I am the only person that somebody knows who does what I do. And so panels are or not just panels, but speaking engagements are interesting because somebody inevitably in that crowd will need somebody to help them with work.
Yeah.
And they know of several companies that do it, but people don't love a cold call. Or they don't know which one to go to. Mm-hmm. And so now they've met somebody and they've connected with that person. And I've done the same thing. People have gotten off stage and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I totally need to, you know, do whatever. And that's your line of work.
Sometimes you connect so well with their presentation that you're like, if I'm connecting this well with them just speaking, I know I'm going to work well with them.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, particularly students and like people just entering, like they're like really ramping up their career. Networking sounds like a hard sell. Like networking sounds like salesmanship and it feels icky, especially to us creatives, right?
Yeah.
We're like,
ugh, networking.
There's a reason why we didn't get a marketing degree. No offense to you marketing degree folks. Y'all just
wonderful for you.
Yeah. Y'all built different. Yeah. It's fine. But I tell people all the time, people like to work with people they like. Mm-hmm. And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So like if people feel connected to you, whether that's a one-on-one conversation or you just got up on a panel and like were authentic, or you did a presentation and you start, talking about mental health and burnout and all this kind of stuff. Now people want to work with you because they like you.
Right.
And so I think that goes a tremendous amount. So I don't ever do these things with this mindset of like, I have to get work out of this.
Yeah.
But you just never know when somebody needs something. You never know when two paths will cross in a certain way.
It was funny because one of the questions that I got in Baton Rouge was, what do you do when you're in that famine mode? What do you do when you're slow? And I said, I do things like this.
She launched our podcast because Eva's losing her mind because our podcast launched like a couple months into my year as AAF president. And so Danielle's like, I got it.
I got it. Perfect. I'll handle it. But it is like, this is what you do. You have to market yourself. Yeah. And so maybe that's in speaking engagement. Maybe that's in having
working on
podcast.
Your website, writing out,
exactly.
Rescheduling your social for a couple months.
That's when I upload all my receipts, So there's plenty to do.
There's always stuff to do.
Yes. I'm like, I have not been slow yet. So
it's a good feeling.
Yes, it is a good feeling.
Yeah.
All right. So you too can hear Eva or I speak. We do have a topic called Becoming a Ghost Boss, Stories about the Freelance Afterlife. If you've enjoyed our episodes where we talk about we rapid fire different working differences, we got that built in for the audience. It's just a good, fun topic. It's not just for freelancers. I have to emphasize that.
That's right.
We share what we've learned freelancing, but it's really things that anyone in this industry can really take back to wherever they work, freelancing or full-time employee. Mm-hmm. So the next couple of events that we have, there's Ad Savvy in Amarillo, Texas on April 5th. That will be myself, Danielle, and then Eva and I will both be speaking.
Double trouble
at the AAF District 3 conference in Richmond, Virginia on April 13th. So if you have an organization or you want to hear us talk and you want us to come to a city near you, feel free to DM us on Instagram at Ghost Boss Podcast, and we will work on getting that lined up.
That's right. That's
excellent.
Right.
All right. Well, I think that's all we have this week. We'll be back next week with another new episode.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Remember to follow us on Instagram at Ghost Boss Podcast. And also please like and review us on your favorite podcast app.